Michelle, I grew up with a lot of factoid type science books. And when my kids were little, I thought that I would open up the world of science for my children. But I have come to learn that living books are a totally different thing. What is really the fundamental difference between these fact based encyclopedia type books and these typically older books that are written more like story and music? What is the difference between these, and is one better than another for our children?
The importance of literature today in the raising of children and teens is so profound, it absolutely cannot be overstated. We have to be so mindful about that which goes into them. And what we had growing up was so superficial. We wouldn't go to all this effort to offer these books if they were only 5 or 10% better. They are completely other. That is why we want to take time to do a comparison, because the change may have seemed gradual enough that we don't realize. But once we peel back the layers and see the core of each of them, we will see why it is so significant that we pursue and acquire and feed that which is richest. This would be a typical modern book of today. It's simply called Forest. If you picture a funnel funneling down to one microscopic point at the base, forest, boom. That's all we get is the title here. One single word. In other words, they're providing us with a label for a file or a directory or a folder that we're going to create in our physical cerebrum. And then they're going to tell us, now we're going to pour data into your file. There's nothing that stirs you or intrigues you. That isn't even supposed to be happening. I have been shortchanged and we didn't make it past the title. We look at the front of this book, it's called Forest, but we don't really see a whole forest, barely any at all, just a little hint at the bottom. What this book is loudly putting forward is not only not just even a whole tree, it's not even a whole section of a whole tree. A forest is nothing more than slabs of cellulose. A forest is actually symphonic in nature. It is complex. It is vital. It reproduces itself. We are stirred and moved when we enter a forest, and they have reduced it to slabs of cellulose. This is extremely significant because don't you know, mankind can manage cellulose. I don't know the mind of the actual author here, but the overall trend I'm talking about now is how can the world be made small enough that mankind can actually imagine that he is large enough to be in charge of it? If we boil that down, it's a divide and conquer mentality. That is what battlefield generals do. They chop it up and then they conquer those parts. We don't want to chop up that which is living and complex and multifaceted into tiny little shards. If we open this book up, we turn to this page where we're seeing one tip of one branch that's forming a pine cone. Let's give another example. Here is just a seed pod, one half of one seed pod. Here is one root. It's as if a forest had been put into some sort of a cosmic sized garbage disposal, ground up into a million little shards. We're supposed to put our hand down into that icky little hole of the garbage disposal, pull out one leftover fragment, and supposedly say to kids, wow, see the wonder in the universe? And guess what? These are not even real seed pods. These are plastic man-made models. The actual incredible power and beauty that God put into a seed pod has been removed by replacing it with a man-made plastic counterfeit. Now, what could be said about this seed pod is, if we were going to again think in majestic terms, is that each seed pod, let's say, for example, yields 1,000 seeds, which then in turn yields 1,000 trees. Now we're into the divine, the majestic. We're back to the immaterial. That's not what something like this generally says. It will give superficial factoids. I'm going to just make something up here because I'm not going to take time to actually read the blurbs. As a general rule, it would say something like, oh, there are 1,700 different types of seed pods. Seed pod coatings can range in depth between 1 and 3 millimeters or whatever. Again, just totally making it up. But that would be the type of superficial material knowledge that would be the emphasis of a book like this. Now, there's nothing wrong with learning about seed pod coatings. It's that what we're not learning. We're only being given material factoids that we can memorize with a material brain. What we're not getting is the immaterial grandeur, majesty, That is what our immaterial heart is actually craving. Albert Einstein said, don't ever bother learning anything you can look up. If what we have here is a lot of superficial data about the material elements of a seed pod, that's the type of thing you could look up. What's lacking here is what you can't look up. But the thing is that mankind can imagine managing the material. Mankind already knows he cannot manage the immaterial. You see these little bits and shards and fragments of text? It's not even a whole text about the seed pod. It is just been fragmented. That's not what the soul is craving. If you'll notice that this page has been broken up, so too has the book. If you can see these blue lines around the exterior, they are segmenting this part of the book as a distinct fragment. If we go back to turning the page again, we'll see on this next page more blue lines again fragmenting this 2-page spread. So the overall book itself has gone through a reductionistic process of every 2-page spread. There's no connection and there's no flow. If you were kayaking, you would not want to get out and have to traverse around an obstacle every 15 feet. You want to get on a river and you want that thing to just take you. That's what a great book should do. But what we have here is a lot of obstacles. If you're going to treat a person like they are a brain with appendages, or if you're going to treat them like they are just a biological memory stick, then you are going to strip out all the wonder and the beauty and the interest and the intrigue, and you're going to be left with downloadable factoids. That immediately makes a kid tune out, and therefore they have had to break up the text in little pieces so that the child could imagine, I guess I can get through that. I guess I can get through that. Look how short that section is. I guess I can tolerate that. It is an admission of defeat. They automatically knew that there would be no inherent desire to read 2 sections in a row without that relief of breakage. Even knowledge was supposed to go right to the heart of the reader. But if you're going to give them superficial factoids, the one that Albert Einstein is already warning you are of low value, you're not going to capture the heart. And that's when you have to rely on big images to try to make up for a lost heart. We don't want to lose the heart of our children. And after a while of seeking great meaning and great purpose and great beauty and great majesty, and if they don't get it and they're repelled time and time again, they will give up seeking. And then they will look for just the drug of the colorful image because they have never been given anything else. So, what is this book showing us right here? Look how much they devalued language and look at how much they valued image. The language is almost superfluous to the photograph. They're saying we can't capture your interest through the language, but we can definitely stimulate the rod and cone cells in your retina. When you see a big image and you see little words, that is a dead giveaway. Also, keep in mind that ultimately language is the carrier of truth.
Michelle, there must be books out there that do speak to the heart of the child and illuminate the forest in a really grand and majestic way. Do you have an example of one of those that we can look at so that we can use it as a side-by-side comparison?
Here is a prime example. And the very first word of this title alone is a dead giveaway that it is what is now called a living book. Secrets? Oh my goodness, this is already telling me something. This title is saying you were created high. You are capable of uncovering secrets. You were even given a desire to uncover secrets because you're an active participant in the world that God has made. So that word secrets is very significant. And then the rest of the title is The Secrets of Redding Glen. Guess what? This is a real place. The author illustrator lived in Redding, Connecticut. This was the forest he walked in. Look at the art on this cover. He is showing a whole forest.
Replete with animals.
Yes. There's some geese up here, etc. He is not feeling small because the forest is big. In the other book, it's implied that who are we if the forest is big? That's because if we've lost our way as a civilization, if we don't know that we have inherent worth because God created this image, if we don't actually even know that He called us to be stewards for this world, then we don't have any status. And then the forest can't be big in comparison. But you can see that right here, this man is comfortable with there being a whole forest and not feeling minimized, and nor should he. So the greater the forest, actually, the greater our calling. So we don't lose by the forest being whole. That's a misnomer that in some way we are debased if the forest is large. But yes, there are real deer, real trees, real birds, real pond. The wholeness of the forest is here. There's no divide and conquer mentality here. When we open this book, you'll see how very different it is inside. These are just like end papers. Do you see how calm they are? Just a lot of what's called white space in publishing. Just relax.
The mind can rest.
Yes, take a breath. And also, it's as if a buffer is being formed around the book, away from the outer world, so that we can go down and into this book. We're going to travel, we're going to make a journey down into this world. If we jump back again over to our other forest book, though, you'll notice it's PC, 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 busy, 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 busy. So if we turn over to the first actual page, look at what we have here. One of the most beautiful paintings of a forest, a whole forest, not parts, not one little root, not one little seed pod. We have the wholeness of the forest. And beside it is some of the most beautiful language you will ever hear.
In Reading there is a glen where the wild geese fly and the salamanders live, where the owl hoots in the moonlight and the wood thrush sings in the day. Wild grapes cling to the beech tree, and the loon cries out in the night. The hills that surround the cove give sanctuary to the fox and the deer. The silence of a deep-shadowed summer's day is broken only by the drone of a cicada or the silver song of a scarlet tanager.
I have goosebumps and I've read it 10,000 times. Language is a gift that our God, our Creator, gave only to human beings. Possums do not have language, starfish do not have language. Language is given to us because we are ultimately spirits. We have an eternal spirit in us that the Lord gave us as a gift with which we can choose life and truth. And so that heart that I was saying earlier is what's hungering for deep truth and deep meaning. Real language is what feeds that heart. Language is the ultimate carrier of ultimate truth to the ultimate core of the human being for ultimate time. And now you know why our culture is at war with language. But what we are doing is bringing language back. Today, so many children recoil when they see language. Again, understandable given the machine code that has been parading as language in their entire lifetimes. Even most parents have not seen real language. That's why I'm saying it's not just 5% better machine code, it's completely other. Machine code and language are two different things. This change began occurring over 50 years ago. So almost no young parents today have ever seen or experienced a living book. That is why it is a completely different experience and why we're establishing whole libraries to find them, to rescue them, and to share them. But if we come back to our book here, do you see what's not here? There's no line separating this page from the next. Our kayak, our canoe is going to continue to flow down the current of this book.
Even the goose is flying off of one page and onto the next, inviting the reader to do the same. What a beautiful touch.
Yes, that's exactly right. And the shadows are long and the glen is silent and dim. The heavy gray skies of January are gone, leaving patches of blue in the clouds. Reading Glen is awake. Let's move to the third page here, and we'll notice again that a tree has fallen here. Generally, when people see a book like this, they have almost always the same reaction, and it's a very understandable one. Well, that's nice. You have picture books about a forest. Why did they think it was a picture book? Because almost the only time that people ever experience real language and real art today is in a picture book. As soon as the book becomes quote unquote academic or scientific, it immediately pops over to the world's definition of education, which is another whole topic. But it definitely is thinking in terms of downloading data in the physical cerebrum, not actually embedding deep truth in the heart. So what we have here though is an actual science book. This is the way science books were made in what is called the golden age of youth literature, and that is when the living books were being produced. If we pop ahead many pages, we'll see here's a fallen tree right here, but look what's happened. The saprophytes have begun to grow on the tree. They are breaking down the tissue. The nutrients are being returned to the soil, and here we have the forest succession cycle that we all had in a textbook, but it's happening organically within the flow of the book itself. So forest succession is encountered not just as a term to be memorized, but a beautiful process. But at the same time, we're seeing predator prey relationships, all sorts of vitality of the whole forester here. And look at the art. The art is so beautiful because, like language, great art gives us the capacity to glean immaterial input. If you'll notice, every image in this non living book came from a machine, either a camera or a computer. Remember that the language is written like machine code. They're treating us as memorizing machines, and every bit of visual image comes from a machine. This is the mechanization of youth literature in a time when there is a like a battle against the actual spiritual element, because it would give a moment's nod to our real actual immaterial king. And what we want is very much for our children to meet that king and in everything he has made. I can give you the same example in a history book. This would be a very typical history book of today. So when we open it up, what are we going to see? 2-page spreads again. Dead giveaway that it's not a living book. This book has been chopped into little pieces. What are we seeing here? What their farm implements looked like, what their clothes looked like, what their toys looked like in ancient Rome. How much of this information about knowing about Roman toys or farm implements will change you as a citizen? How much of it will form you as a patriot? How much of it will help you analyze the governments of this world to know whether or not they are holding the truth? None of it. So it parades as being important education, but every single bit of it is utterly and totally superficial. In fact, it's skin deep. What we have right here is how the Romans scraped off their dead skin cells. So we couldn't be more precise in saying that this is completely skin deep information. It took me 22 years of doing this work before I found my first copy of this book. I was blown away when I saw it. How could I tell just by looking at the cover that it was a living book? For one thing, there's real art. This art is conveying something to me immediately. We all know that the Roman arches were built to aggrandize government accomplishments, usually the domination or the takeover of an entirely new people group. So, this is the government's view of itself. See the scale here? This is the government's view of the individual. Look at the contrast. And guess who all these individuals are that they're showing? Soldiers. Why do they deserve to be shown? Because they're going to help the government further aggrandize itself through conquest. So a powerful message is coming. I already know I don't want to live in the ancient Roman Empire because the government is trying to enlarge itself. And the only person that has any status is anybody who can help the government do that. The artist knew this and he was trying to convey something to us. If we open up the book, we will see just an absolutely delightful lark, a view of the 7 hills of Rome. If we probably all had the 7 hills on a test, but we don't remember them. Remember, Albert Einstein is telling us we are intuitively going to shed that which we know is superficial, but we're going to cling to that which we know is important truth. Here, a child can actually lark their way and go through the little pathways. So they're going to have an experience with the 7 hills of Rome. An experience is different from just memorization because an experience now involves the soul, a deeper part of the person than just their cerebrum. People are more than biological memory sticks. I'm going to say that over and over again. Here we are on basically the preface page, and we see, the legendary twins, Romulus and Remus, being saved by the wolf. We know that Rome's going to get its name from Romulus. So we have a hint of what's going to happen here. Now, here's the first page, the twins grow up. Here's the second set of pages, they establish a city and therefore people move. Now, very importantly, we are on just the third time that I've turned the page here, and we can see that because they have a community, leaders emerge, kings. By the 7th king, Tarquin the Proud, which moniker tells you everything you need to know, he's already so oppressive that the people come to realize that there's an innate human tendency to dominate and that the people themselves are going to have to find a way to limit that tendency. And so they give birth to a Roman republic. So we've turned the page 3 times and we've already learned the ultimate lesson that there is to learn about ancient Rome. And that is, you better get yourself a republic and you better keep it or you will be miserable. That changes a civilization. It creates patriots. It creates those who want rule of law and who want limited governments and understand the alternatives. Those are the types of things that are not in books today. Now, this is the point at which you maybe say, well, I still do want my children to know about Roman musical instruments or Roman clothing. Of course, when we go for the greater, which is the ultimate truth, of course, the lesser will be thrown in. Here's a Roman musical instrument right here. It's when we go for the lesser that we miss out on the greater. So if we only go for cerebral knowledge, we will miss out on heart knowledge.
And as you said, we're talking about the greater. So where do we meet the musical instrument? We meet it on the battlefield because, again, that's what the Romans valued.
That's an excellent point. Very, very good point. Continuing on, we're going to see Roman ships. We're going to see Roman clothing. We are going to see the black figure, red figure pottery. And we're going to see many other important things as well. For example, what did we have on the test as kids? What was the date Julius Caesar was assassinated, right? Yes, that's March 15th. And the year, no one ever knows. I've been saying this for almost 30 years, and only three people have ever known the year. One was a college history professor, and the other one was a home educating mom who had just taught a unit on ancient Rome. I can't even remember who the third one was. But here's my point. Why do we not remember it, even though we were tested on it? Because we intuitively knew it was not the main part of the story. What's really significant about Julius Caesar's assassination, when all the senators crowded around him, was that he was trying to end Rome as a republic and turn it into an empire so he could have unlimited power. So instead of teaching us about the effort that one must undergo, and I'm not that assassination is a response, I don't mean that, but we're just talking about the history of the thing. Brutus was, his goal was to try to retain a republic and prevent there from being elitist unlimited government. This is what's happening in a book like this. We are discovering that. How much lesser is a book that just shows us Roman toys and doesn't show us that hard decisions have to be made? Again, not promoting assassination, but just saying that one really has to think about the nature of one's nation and realize that unlimited elitism is going to be tragic. So that's the type of content that is in the older books. In an older living book, it's not just that the morality will still be wholesome. That is extremely important. Please do not think for a minute that I'm minimizing that. But the morality of a book is what I think of as the ripened fruit. It's the roots of the tree that are going to determine what fruit comes and whether or not it can ripen. So, what we want to think about in youth literature is what are the roots? The roots are the very nature. So, the books changed in their very nature from before, when there was ultimate truth, when there were great principles, when the immaterial qualities of the Lord's actual creation were put on display for everyone to enjoy and to imbibe and to deeply grasp into their own souls. And we have changed it into mankind being in charge of a highly reductionized world where little tidbits or factoids are supposedly memorized, and that's called education. So the living books are other in their very, very, very nature. Third thing is the topics being covered. I was doing some work for a foundation, and they sent me to one of the local public libraries. I would estimate that two-thirds of all the youth biographies were about sports stars. Imagine a 9-year-old boy walking into that room. He is receiving a powerful tacit message from the culture that the most important people in the world are athletes. Now, athletes do have incredible self-discipline, etc., and they have had to practice a craft at a high level and fitness and so forth. It's not that there's anything wrong with being an athlete. The problem is two-thirds of the entire biography section being about that one thing.
It's just disproportionate.
That's a great word for it. Disproportionate is a wonderful way to describe it. If we take that remaining one third, I would say that about 95% of those were entertainers of a different sort, either in music or film. Virtually every book in the entire youth section in a very prosperous library was an entertainer of one sort or another. What is that telling this generation? That the purpose of life is to be entertained when they all want to be on their devices and not actually grow into great human beings with a special calling on their life, which is actually what their life is all about. It's also saying that the highest achievement would to be an entertainer. For example, I could not find a single book about Patrick Henry, either in the youth section or the adult section. And this is the man who said, "Give me liberty or give me death," which actually helped galvanize the frustration of the various colonies into a working whole that could begin to take steps towards independence. But guess where Henry should have been sitting on the shelf? Guess what was there? Henson. We had books about Jim Henson making the Muppets. Again, there's nothing wrong with Kermit the Frog, but you can't build civilization out of felt puppets and not about patriots. So the living books are not only more wholesome, they are not only completely other in their very nature and conveying of the ultimate truths, but they actually also address topics of actual worthiness in every field. Because during that golden age of youth literature, which we are trying so hard to rescue, acquire, and lend, there was literally the highest quality language and the highest quality art on every topic you can possibly imagine. It cannot be overstated the beauty of what that was. If we had every part of a Lamborghini on the floor of this room right here, but they were all separated, we would drive nowhere. The parts have to come together into a whole, which of course takes a designer. Then it comes together and then you are transported. Then at a very high rate of speed and with great thrill, you take the journey of a lifetime. I've heard so many beautiful comments over the years. I knew that there were beautiful books. I just didn't know they could teach until now. Oh my goodness, I get to combine beauty and truth. I remember another mom saying, I knew there were beautiful books, but I didn't think I could sacrifice currentness. Then come to find out, there's no lack of currentness on the need for limited government. There's no lack of currentness on the symphonic nature of a forest. Truth is truth is truth. It's always truth. Families start to discover how transportative, how immersive, how deeply meaningful these books are and how they feed into the very eternal soul. And then the little factoids are actually not sacrificed, but remembered forever. I often hear that as well. Well, that's great. I want them to have all this beauty, but I need them to actually know certain facts. Guess what? If you're looking for facts, give the great, deep, rich picture, and then the facts immediately have purpose because the child is not just knowing about something, they are building a relationship with it. Knowing about something is different from having built a relationship with it. And in a living book, you are actually having a vicarious experience and relationship with not only people and nature and composers and everything else, but also with planets, ideas. There's just no end to it. Living books can be just dessert, but then they can also start to be the appetizer, and then pretty soon they can be the side dish. And if you're like me, they can become the actual meat and potatoes because of how richly they feed. So I hope that it helps explain some of the vibrant beauty and import and impact of these great pieces of literature. And I can promise you that once children discover them, whole new worlds open up. At first, there can be some resistance because part of their language being has not even oftentimes even developed. It can almost hurt them at first when they're actually asked to begin to create mental images inside of themselves from language. But we were created to do that. It is in there. Parents, be courageous, stand firmly on what you know is good, beautiful, and true, and you will see it win out over time. Give your children the best, and these are absolutely the best.
Michelle, would you say it's fair that many of these beautiful, vibrant, living picture books are helping us to develop that skill of picturing ideas and imagining ideas? I still think a picture book is a brilliant way to learn about a new concept or a new idea, and that then helps us and prepares us to go on and do that imagining for ourselves.
I very much agree with you. In fact, Clyde Robert Bulla, a favorite author of many of us, said that actually, when you're writing a children's book, it's harder because you have a limited language and you have to say things in fewer words. So you really have to think about what's important to distill and how to very effectively communicate it. And you have to think about the art that will support it in very meaningful ways. When you go through that process, it's like a purification or refining process. And yes, the potency is really, really there. And it is a wonderful way to get started. And as you said, it creates the hunger for more and more and more. Why do we read? I hear that often today. Isn't this the video age? There will never be an age where language is not core. Jesus is the word. The word became flesh. The word dwells amongst us. The Lord said that He watches over His word to perform it. He said that He would protect every word in the Bible, down to the dot of every I and the cross of every T. Men went to the stake to protect the written word of God. God, language is God's idea. The world will never come up with an alternative to actual language. You are doing a great thing for your young people when you actually get them immersed in language and comfortable with it, and they will be fed so richly and deeply by it. Their inner world will become so rich and dense and saturated in colors and ideas that, as you said, they will never want to go back to having that image provided for them.
Michelle, this is absolutely amazing. If we are just getting started in this and we want to know more, where can we go to find more?